make sure that that community consultation is definitely something that is embedded in the development of an economic development strategy. And the strategy needs to be unique. It needs to be separate from an overall community plan. It needs to be, it needs to be a variety of different things. And I'm hoping that our voices aren't cutting out here because it appears our speakers. But Colleen, what are some of the important things that have to be included in a strategy, both in the way of writing it and then even some content?
Well, definitely that consultation piece, as you said, Dale, is really, really important. But there's some definite do's and some definite don'ts when creating a strategy in my opinion, and we'll see if Dale agrees with me on this. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. I think there's some communities across, certainly across the province that we live in, British Columbia, but we've seen them elsewhere throughout Canada, that the strategy is so large, so much information, and costs, up to $100,000 or more in some communities. And it's just a waste of money, if you ask me.
Really is.
It has to be a strategy that is actually realistic and doable. And by that, I mean, it's realistic for the budget that you have in your community and as an economic development organization. What your budget is has to correspond to your strategy, and what is your capacity. So we see strategies sometimes developed for communities that don't even have an economic development practitioner in the community, and yet they've spent $40,000 or $50,000 or $60,000 on this strategy that a lot of times looks really, really pretty. I'll tell you that, right?
Which by the way, was too much money.
Yeah, but it was too much money. So I would say that is key. Really make sure that whether you do your strategy in-house, whether you hire somebody outside to do a strategy, it doesn't matter, that the end goal is it's realistic and it's doable. And it gives you a detailed action plan, especially for those first year strategies that are identified, not just, start talking to your businesses. One of your strategies is do a business retention and expansion program. Make sure you get the details about how that works. What are those actions? How do I do that? What are my step-by-step actions? And what is the corresponding budget? What are my timelines for all of that? This is all stuff that should be in your strategy, particularly if it is from an outside consultant or agency that's doing it. You're paying them good money. You make sure you get what you need in that strategy.
And it's so important to look beyond your own borders too when you're developing these strategies, whether it's the nation or whether it's the individual community. You need to look beyond. You need to look at, okay, what is the local government from the neighboring local government doing? What is the regional district doing? How are they implementing their economic development program, and what strategies do they have in place? What actions, what steps are they putting in place around economic development? And how can we piggyback on that? How can we actually benefit from the work that they're doing and make it so that we're also benefiting within our own community? And I remember, when we worked when I worked in Lillooet, we had a member of the Indigenous community from the nation from Stalium on our economic development committee. In Chilliwack, when I worked in Chilliwack, we had a representative from Stolo on our committee on the development corporation that the city had set up. And I believe, Colleen, did you have the West Bank?
West Bank First Nations. I'm from Kelowna in British Columbia, and we always had that partnership and that relationship. And I think that's so important to, no matter what community you're from, you're right, to reach out beyond your borders. And a lot of times, we talk community, and when we say the word community, we're meaning everything, right?
Yeah,
we're not just talking about Kelowna or West Bank First Nation or the Central Okanagan. Like, all of that is community when we start talking about
and obviously your strategy is not going to identify things that you should be doing in that neighboring community, unless it's things like working with Indigenous entrepreneurs and helping them get into locations maybe that will benefit them, but it will also benefit your own because you're helping create income, you're helping create jobs for your members. But so your strategy really needs to be unique for you, but also how can you build it off those other successes, those other things that are also happening within the region. The other thing maybe too on this too is that whether you're a Native Development Corporation doing economic development and starting your enterprises, or an economic development officer, for an example, like in Hawaii First Nations on Vancouver Island, they have a development corporation, but then they also within the external or within the governance body themselves, they also have an economic development officer. So you kind of have both ways that you're working, you're developing your own enterprises through the development corporation, or maybe you're developing partnerships with private sector to create projects within your community. But then you also have that economic development officer who's doing, hopefully complementing what the development corporation is doing, working with the development corporation, but also at the same time sort of doing that broader approach to economic development. So be realistic about your readiness. Colleen, what are some of those important things around community readiness that any community needs to really address?
Yeah, and normally when we do this presentation, we have a sort of a mini readiness test that we get participants to fill out. And I don't know if I can upload it through the chat here or not. I'm not sure if I can, but we can always, after the call, we can make that readily available to all the participants and get that emailed out to you. But excuse me, it's just a short sort of maybe 30 to 40 questions to really look at the readiness of your community. So, and that means ready for investment, that means ready for entrepreneurship, that means ready for economic development in a sense, right? So we've broken it down into different ways. We look at the community readiness and do you have that economic development strategy in place? What type of businesses do you have in your community? Are you talking to your businesses there? What type of policies in place do you have for land use, for development, for investment into your community? And the questionnaire really starts you thinking about these pieces of information that you need in place to consider yourself investment ready. And we've done investment readiness assessments for a lot of communities. And what we find is when the communities themselves do the self-assessment, I would say 70 to 80% of them will say, yep, we are ready for investment. And then we'll take a look and do a much more detailed dive into the investment readiness sort of components, looking from a location or site selector perspective, looking from an investor's perspective. And we will find that probably closer to 20% of communities are actually ready for investment. So it's a nice little test to kind of just get you thinking about your community in a different way to see if it is really ready.
Yeah, and the last thing you should do is to take, and if we get this out, I think it'd be great if we could send it out to Candu, could circulate it to everybody on the call today. Yeah. But don't be disappointed if you do the assessment and you answer things honestly. You may, and there's a good chance that you will fail the test. That's okay. I mean, we can't name really a couple of communities that really have passed when even but that doesn't mean you're failing. It means that you're actually you're steps ahead of many others who aren't looking internally and seeing what they can change. And because you are taking the steps by doing the assessment to make sure that you're ready for that investment, and it doesn't have to cost you money to do this self-assessment. It doesn't cost you anything, but it will give you ideas of the things that you need to focus on to make sure your community is ready for that next phase of economic development.
It starts to identify those gaps, and we just talked about doing an economic development strategy. A nice place to start is actually this self-assessment, because as I said, it does identify these gaps that can be part of your strategy. So, maybe one of the questions is talking about what type of information do you have in your community, the demographic information, the statistical information. That's actually really important to have in a community. And if you don't have that information readily available, maybe that is part of a strategy to put together, right? To make sure that you have those components so that you are able to answer that type of information when you get it.
understand your local and regional assets. And we always talk about this, and we actually are amazed sometimes when we even get into within a local government, or we get into, you know, a regional district, and they go, oh, we don't have something, we don't have this, we don't have that. And they're thinking like, we don't have a hospital, or we don't have an airport. And it always amazes me how they don't look beyond their own border. Yes, maybe it's not within your own border. Could you imagine when you're looking at that, we have about 400 and somewhat, I believe it is, local, regional, indigenous governments, communities within the province of British Columbia alone. Can you imagine having that many airports and that many hospitals and that many, you know, community centers and that many, you know, like it's just not feasible. It's not something that could realistically happen. But that asset that's in somebody else's community nearby, you have to take that into consideration as yours. It's yours to use. It's yours to access. It's yours to, you know,
promote.
To promote. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And when you're talking about your community, you're actually using, you say, oh yeah, we have a hospital, you know, located here. We have an airport located here. You know, what about like the Kelowna airport and what's that, West Banks, I guess?
Yeah, well, West Bank First Nations would definitely say that that's an asset for them, and would be able to market that. And it goes beyond just those hard infrastructures too, right? I mean, it's labor force. You want to look beyond your own community borders and say what your labor force is, because if you're a small community and maybe you really have less than 100 folks who are your labor force, but surrounding you are larger communities that maybe within an hour's drive, you might have 10,000. Right? Yeah. Available labor force, or not, maybe not available, but that make up that labor force. And that's your market too. That's something for you to promote. That's yours. You own that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important. I'm glad you actually took it down to that level with 100 people living in the community, and how many, when they talk about their community, say, you know, we have 120 living, you know, on the land, or but we need to think beyond, again, that number into that, what's that regional community? So, because they can draw. So if you are wanting to work with external investors or are wanting to start something on your community or in your community, and you say, oh, we don't have enough employees, think beyond that. Where can those employees come from? And they can come from within those neighboring communities. So.
There's a saying that you honor your past by investing in your future.
Working together gets the goals that we need to get better and faster.
It's been a big step towards more acceptance on all sides.
We're trying to change a paradigm here.
First Nations municipal collaboration is important for a few reasons. You have communities collaborate, they're planning together, they're developing local economic development plans or environmental sustainability plans. We're all living in the same country, and collaborating at a community level is so important for understanding each other, for living together.
The core of our partnership has got to be communication. We shared the same schools, the same playgrounds, hockey rinks. We knew one another, but our elected officials didn't have a venue where they could communicate regularly. But now with the SETI program, we meet at least once a month, whether it's police and fire services, healthcare, education, public works. The foundation that we created is just a strong network of communication now between EDOs, councillors, mayors and chiefs, and even the citizens in our three communities.
On a formé un partenariat entre les deux communautés non autochtones, une communauté autochtone. Qu'est-ce qu'on a fait? On avait une vision ensemble. On a mis un focus juste sur tourisme. Si on n'avait pas d'autres partenaires, ça ne marcherait pas.
It's moved us forward, getting to know each other, getting to know the history. It helped to facilitate. It helped to get the parties all in the same room, in the same place, got them talking, looking for projects that they could do together.
Our people are Muskegson first, Enoch Cree Nation members first, but we also still feel that as though we're Edmonton. The MOU and the partnership just give us more ownership together in a mutually beneficial way.
We've been neighbors with Enoch First Nation for more than a century. And yet it's only in the last few years that we've started to act like neighbors. I think the most important thing about the work that we did was we built relationships, we built friendships, and we built trust.
You know, our teams do work together, and I like the exposure they get at the municipal level at those tables for development. This gives investors a lot of certainty and a lot of comfort knowing that we can build relationships with other First Nations.
Collaboration between municipalities and First Nations is extremely important. We need to focus on helping our communities advance their own agenda in terms of employing our people, getting them training, and doing other wonderful things around community development. We've entered into a period of reconciliation as Canadians. We want a better outcome. And it's not for me personally, it's for our children. To me, that's what Canada's all about.
We wanted to play that just leading into this next slide that develops strong partnerships. And I'm not 100% certain. Yes, and we will definitely share. We'll share the presentations, which will actually have the videos embedded. And so we had no problem doing that at all. The strong partnerships are so critical. And again, you know, I know we've talked about regional. There's a difference between the assets and the partnerships, and it's so important. It's so important for people to work together to achieve success. And again, whether it's happening within your own boundaries or in the neighboring community where you're partnering with somebody to do something in that community, but again, you're benefiting. You know, we can just look back. Colleen, we were in Saskatchewan there in Creighton. Or is that Manitoba? What side of the border it's on?
Yeah, Manitoba.
Yeah. And Flin Flon area, and you see the community agreeing in Creighton with creating an urban reserve, where, you know, in the center of the community they built a gas station and Tim Hortons right at a major intersection. It's absolutely packed and busy, constantly nonstop. But that's a partnership. Those are the types of things where, you know, the local government's helping to ensure or help create success with the local Indigenous, the Peter Valentine, First Nations, and creating those partnerships. And at the same time, it's creating jobs and new enterprises and again, even new revenue opportunities for the local government as well. So both sides were benefiting from that. Colleen, I think you had some examples on this too, right?
Well, this one's just a quick one. This is a picture of a housing development in the city of Langford. And Langford is located just outside the city of Victoria on Vancouver Island. And what happened there is it was a partnership between the province of BC, the city of Langford, and the Macola Housing Society. So there's two phases involved with this. And the first phase was to build out 100 units, and they just finished 60 of them, and move-in was last week, July 15th. So 60 families got to move into these new beautiful buildings. They are apartments. I like what they've also done with this is the lower floor in this phase one has some office space in it. So they've got a couple of nonprofit organizations in there. So Macola Housing Society is one of the organizations that are occupying some of that space. They've got a second phase planned as well, so an additional number of housing coming on board in 2021. And if we talk about numbers, you know, financially, the province put in about $8 million for this project. They're also offering some annual subsidy for operating costs as well. The city of Langford is giving, I think, about $400,000 in municipal waivers, and the Macola Housing Society provided the land that was valued at about $1.5 million or so, and then they put in some equity dollars as well. But what it's really showing that, like, this development and partnership was great because the Macola Housing Society identified that need of affordable housing for their members, for their community. They wanted to make sure that there was safe housing, that there was affordable housing, that there was nice housing for their members, to keep them close, to keep them in the community, and to keep them with the family. And that's exactly what's happening with this development.
And I think it's creative too, where how they have put that commercial, that office space on the bottom, and it creates sustainability. It creates sustainability for the housing that's there, because it'll always be, you'll be able to maintain and with that steady flow of income from leasing office space or commercial space.
Mhm.
And it's a great way to build sort of long-standing housing developments with the housing on top and the commercial and residential. And really, it can be located anywhere. So it doesn't matter whether it's in a local government, doesn't matter if it's an Indigenous community, it can be built anywhere where there's a market or a need. And
that's right. Yeah, I'm not sure if phase 2 is having that office space, but I really hope they do. I think it would be great if you had some office or commercial space, retail space, had a little coffee shop downstairs. It's a revenue generator too, right? So, but I don't know what phase 2 is.
And it could be a native art gallery like the one we were in down in Vancouver there, where there's the local artists working or whatever. So there's all kinds of different things that could be done and incorporated. You need to have those foundational pieces in place. And the foundational pieces, there's a lot of different ways to explain what those foundational pieces are, but sort of the easiest way to explain them is a website, a Facebook page, social media, a community profile. So something that me as somebody that's looking at the area can print off and say, hey, what is this community all about? What is the region all about? What are the opportunities that I can pursue if I go there? And it covers a lot of different. A community profile will cover a lot of different things. What are some of the things that are typically?
Well, they have a couple of different audiences, right? A community profile. It's not just the demographics on your community and your region, right? So as we were talking about a few slides ago, don't just focus on your community boundaries. Look beyond. Look and expand. What are your assets? What is that labor force? What are the numbers? All of that sort of stuff is important. Not just to focus on just your boundaries and include that in the community profile, but you are talking about your amenities, you are talking about your recreation, you are talking, as I said, the hard numbers as well. So it answers a lot of questions for a lot of different audiences.
And then, and like you talk about, a website is honestly, website's number one. So if somebody's looking on the outside and whether it's an internal audience, so can you imagine just recently with COVID, if you didn't have a website where you were talking about what is actually happening in the community around COVID? What are those types of things that community members should know? And you can't obviously hold community meetings and bring the people together. You've got to share that information. So if you have broadband, and this is always a challenge, and broadband is so important to have in the community, and we've been supporting the expansion of the broadband throughout the province and the country to make sure that every community has access to this. A good quality broadband, because it's a strong part of economic development, but is using that website to share information and to keep the communities informed. And it's through a website, through use of things like social media, Facebook pages, LinkedIn, Twitter, all of those types of things, and if you're actually communicating with businesses and you want to communicate your opportunities to an external audience of business owners, LinkedIn is your best tool. And so if you're not using LinkedIn when it comes to talking about the opportunities that are maybe in your communities, use it. Use LinkedIn is by far going to reach a much broader audience of what it is you're trying to target than say Facebook or Twitter will use. You remember Twitter is a point in time. So it's again, a tweet comes and 30 seconds later, another tweet is come in from somebody else and it just gets moved down and it really is not the ideal way, despite some people's use of it. So.
Yeah, it's under fire.
Yeah.
Quite a bit right now, the use of Twitter. So.
Yes. Engaging with your business community. And if we could move one thing to the top, I personally believe this engaging your business community, and maybe the next one is one of the most important things you should be doing in your community. You have businesses in your community. You have businesses, whether they're working out of their homes, whether they're working out of an individual, an office space or a gas station that that they own on their land, or even if it's a housing development, if somebody's going into business, what are their challenges? What are their opportunities for new growth? What can they do to employ more people? How can they work closer with the rest of the community to make sure that they're successful and that you're helping them to achieve that success? And it's the easiest thing to do. And you know what? I've heard from communities that say, oh, we only have 2 businesses. We only have 3 businesses. We only have 1 business. You actually have more, because there's people working out of your homes. And we need to think of that. And I can remember when, you know, we've been to natural disasters where, you know, the community didn't have necessarily office buildings and everything else, but they had, you know, like 150, it was an Indigenous community, 150 businesses, but they were all home-based businesses, construction companies, contractors, and these are businesses. And so we need to communicate with them. We need to educate ourselves on what it is they're doing and help share their successes and help them overcome any challenges they might be having.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the number one activity as an economic development officer, as your economic development organization, should be engaging with your businesses through whatever tools that is for you, whether it's face-to-face, which is harder to do right now, but there's some way, and a consistent way. Yeah. So a lot of times we talk to different communities who have every now and then done what's called a business walk, where they walk through maybe their downtown Main Street and pop into their communities and talk with them, or into their businesses and talk with them for 5 or 10 minutes and ask a few questions and come back and say, yeah, we've done a great business retention and expansion program. We did business walks 3 years ago. So, you know, we're pretty on it. We know what's happening in our business community. And as great as those business walks are, that is not a comprehensive business retention plan. And I think it has to be something that's more comprehensive and developed.
It's going out and building that trust and the relationship with those business owners, where you will get to find the information that it is that you're looking for, so much more than what you'll find on a business walk, which is like a 5-minute talk. Right. You're not really building a relationship when you're doing that. Again, you know, if anybody wants, you know, some more information on, you know, sort of business retention, we do have some information we can send out. But it is something that I can't say enough is how important it is to be out there engaging with your businesses. Again, if it's 1 or 2 or 50. And the other thing that I would really suggest you do is take an inventory of the businesses that are in your community, and where possible, and sometimes this is challenging if the trust isn't there and the relationships aren't there, is ask their permission to create a database of the businesses that you actually have in your community, you know, and break them down by NAICS codes and start to build upon, like, even create on your website a business directory, so that, you know, like those people, so that those businesses, as you're actually marketing what it is they're doing at the same time. Yeah, and honestly, talking about what's happened over the last 3 months, the pandemic, COVID-19, if you're not talking to your businesses and this doesn't give you the encouragement, shall we say, and reinforce the importance of engaging with your businesses, I don't know what will. Like, you know, not much. Yeah.
I'm Catherine Parker. I'm the owner and operator of One Koi Modern Fabrications. I operate my business out of my home reserve, which is Chigang First Nation. I specialize in CNC plasma cutting, custom fabrications, and sculpture.
I'm the owner and chief changemaker of Native Goods. We're a handbags and accessories and clothing brand dedicated to elevating Indigenous women and girls.
So Wookiee Films is a Franco-Métis owned and operated production company here in Winnipeg.
I'm Tarina Rizzoli, and I own and operate Rizzoli Denture and Implant Clinic in Stony Plain. I'm a simple farm girl turned denturist. I'm somebody in the community that wants to do the best that I can possibly do for every single patient that walks into my door.
I come from the Nukok Nation of Bellacoola, BC. I have 3 brothers, and every one of them have been in here. My mom, every time it got tough, she was there for me.
My whole family, from my kids to my parents, my sisters, the whole community, like, everybody's so supportive.
now I feel like this generation, we're at the point where we are proud, like, of our roots, we're proud of our history, we're proud of where we came from.
When I was a kid, I remember a lot of Francophone productions in Winnipeg, but there was less focus on the Franco-Métis aspect of it. So it's really great to see a lot of projects coming from Manitoba that focus on Franco-Métis issues.
I know I've got a few messages from girls and women on Instagram that they've just been inspired by the work I'm doing, and it kind of pushed them to maybe enter that career or just try it out.
I came from nothing, was living in poverty, but now I own a business because I held on to that anything is possible.
Sometimes it's about telling your story and being relatable and showing kind of where you come from and how you can overcome any obstacle.
This is great, and if you're not familiar with Futurepreneur, there's an office, I believe, in every province. There are organizations around, or there are some organizations that actually work directly with them, but it's just one example of working with your local entrepreneurs. And again, I go back to I think it's Hawaii First Nations again, where they're actually helping their entrepreneurs that come in that have a business idea. They're helping them start up by helping them write business plans. Futurepreneur will actually, in some cases, will provide financial lending, financial support, and there's all kinds of tools out there and organizations out there that you can try to access resources from to help those businesses. And I encourage you to look at that. Again, going back to where we talk about working with businesses and business retention, many of these, those businesses will start off as entrepreneurs, and you need to make sure you nurture them, you get them going, you get them strong, and then you maintain that relationship through business retention. And engaging with them later on. It's so important. Did you want to talk about any of these?
Yeah, we can touch on them super briefly, but I do agree with Futurepreneur, and they do have an Indigenous program that is aimed towards 18 to 39-year-olds, I think it is, and it's a great program where they can either start a business or buy a business with financing, as you were saying, like up to $60,000, I think it is. But what's great is they also give them up to 2 years of mentoring. So they'll match them with somebody so that they are successful in their business.
Just turning them loose. And,
That's right, exactly, yeah. And I will say too, with Futurepreneur, there is an online tool that will help you write that business line. It'll give you all the templates, all the prompts you need. So regardless of whether you're going to go through a program through Futurepreneur, I would encourage anybody who's interested in starting a business to go online to their website anyways and look at that business plan writing tool, because it is a free resource and it's really great. So some of these are really good, and there's just good stories behind them all. So the first one is Nietzsche Gear, I think it's called. And it's out of Saskatchewan, and it's a young fellow who started the business when he was going to university in Saskatchewan, and he has a really interesting story to tell. He saw two business competitions were advertised, and he thought, well, you know what, I think I want to do business. So he entered both of them, not really knowing what he was going to do, not really knowing anything particularly about starting a business, and to jump to the end of the two competitions. He won both of them, and took the winning money. I think it was about $16,000, invested it in this company here. It's a clothing lifestyle sort of sports brand, and today now it's all through North America. It's being sold, and he gives a percentage of his profits to fund underprivileged youth into sports. And he tells that story about why he does that, because that was his experience as a youth, and it's a lovely story, and it's got a lovely ending to it. So it's a really good lesson reading his history and his experience. The middle one, super quick, is Kukuli Cafe. Again, a great story, a great learning experience there as well. They were started selling Bannock in a pop-up shop outside of a car wash. And they did that on weekends, whenever they could, but really the dream was to own a cafe or a you know, a full service restaurant type of a thing. And they finally did it after a number of years of doing the pop-up shop and going to events and doing whatever they could. But, you know, to be successful in the restaurant business, they knew it's a husband and wife team, but they knew that they needed some sort of education, and maybe that couldn't be a formal education, but so they both got jobs. One of them took a job in Tim Hortons, the other one I think was Starbucks, and that's how they got their education of how to sell coffee, how to sell pastries, how to sell sandwiches, and then opened up that and has a couple of locations now, and great story, lots more of history there to talk about. Spirit Bear Coffee. It's Canada's first Indigenous coffee roaster. Yeah, sorry, thank you. Yeah, it's all organics, responsibly sourced, that sort of thing. And their lesson is partnerships. They will go and talk to people, do these B2B events, business to business events, finding the partnerships to get their product into as many markets as they possibly can. And they've done really, really well for themselves. So just really good lessons, really good stories.
And we've met them through Aboriginal Business Match as well,
That's
right?
Yeah.
So, or Advanced Business Match, I believe, which is an event that if you haven't heard of it, it's a great opportunity to sort of connect with others and both in the private enterprise. As a matter of fact, I think Spirit Bear actually met one of their partners, which is Pacific Coastal Airlines, by Advanced Business Match on Vancouver Island. So it was a great opportunity for both companies, and they have a long-standing partnership where Spirit Bear Coffee is used by Pacific Coastal Airlines in their markets.
Yeah.
This is put together. It just makes me look over. It looks so beautiful there. I just love it. The using your tourism assets and you know, look around your community, look around the regions that you're in, whether you're, you know, in Mitsasumi, I'm sorry, I can't sure exactly the pronunciation of it. Mitsasini. You know, whether you're in you know, in the Shuswap at the hotel there and the resort with the golf course and whether you're, you know, it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in Huayet and have campgrounds and you know, water and mountains and rivers, you know, it's what are those tourism assets that you have within, again, focusing on that whole area, that whole regional area that you can build upon. You know, one of my favorite things is that when I lived in Lillooet, and one of my favorite things was, of course, I was born and raised there, so I kind of knew everybody, but was to go down to the fishing rocks and watch. Okay, I actually did fish too, but anyways, don't tell anybody. But that was a long time ago. But I did, you know, as to watch the fishing going on, and when you see I believe the Bridge River Band has taken and actually built bleachers where people can sit there and watch, where tourists come. You know, maybe not this year, but when tourists will come and, you know, create a little bit of a stand selling. I'm not exactly sure everything that they sell for food out of it, but you could be doing things like that. And you could be, you know, doing, you know, promoting that cultural aspects that's so important to the communities. You know, what is your culture? What is your history? And using those tourism assets to really tell the story. That so many come to our province to learn, and people from within our province this year have the opportunity to really, you know, always have the opportunity, but it's just that they've never done it. Now they're doing it this year. A bit more forced travel to travel with the province and help them learn about that culture and the history of the communities and region. Just want to cover these last two off rather quickly because we're kind of out of time here.
Yeah, we are. You're talking too much.
Typical.
Celebrate the small wins, and that's exactly what it says. Is just because it's small, something that you've done in your community as economic development doesn't mean you shouldn't celebrate it in some ways. And maybe that's the reopening of a business after COVID, right?
Yeah.
Celebrate that win, and let people know. Again, we go back to the beginning when we said, as economic development staff, are you letting people know and communicating out what you do? Well, these are some of the things you can do. And when they're wins, there's something positive for the most part that you should be doing. But again, it creates that synergy within your community and within your region. It creates that community support for you that's so important for successful economic development. So give it a celebration, and whatever that means for you and your community, do it.
And obviously, if you're celebrating things this year, do not do groups this size. Please social distance and wear a mask. Because that picture is not the greatest for that. And then, of course, measuring your success. You know, it's again going back to where we talked at the beginning about communication and letting people know what it is we do. You know, when you're and when you go through the whole presentation and you talk about things like your strategy. How are you measuring the success of that strategy? Are you checking the boxes to say, this is what we implemented in year one, this is what we're going to do in year two, and then checking the boxes at the end of year two to say, yes, we've done these, no, we haven't, this is they're in progress, or whatever it is. And you've got to make sure that you're measuring and you're planning, and then you're repeating it all the time. And you constantly go back and do this cycle over again, but always measure your success, because it helps you prove the value of economic development in your communities. And,
and I think an important point is if you get to some strategy that you haven't done for whatever reason, that isn't a negative. Your community is changing all the time, right? Exactly. The region, the economy, so many different things are changing. COVID showed us that for sure. Yeah. So if there's something that you don't measure because it hasn't been done, just figure out why, right? Like, why was that? And be honest about it, again, back to your stakeholders about why that isn't working, not that it's a failure.
Yeah, and Colleen, that's really important. I completely lost where I was going with that. But I was going to add another comment to that, but I'm not going to bother now. Oh, and I think actually that's what it was going back to the strategy when we develop these strategies, and are we building in, this is what we're going to do in year one. And like you said, well, maybe it doesn't get done in year one, it's year two, and the communities are changing. Mm-hmm. Nothing is written in stone. They're written on a piece of paper. And so it's if you didn't do it in year one, move it to year two. Or you know what, because things have changed with COVID or with other things, you might have had something in your strategy that you were going to do in year three. But maybe now is the time to be doing it. Mm-hmm. Because it's a better time, things are easier. Now the last thing we want to talk about is our disasters, and we've had a lot of experience globally doing working with disasters, and unfortunately nobody has experienced I would say that we know of in Canada as this, and we developed the Economic Disaster Recovery Program back in 2012 after the devastating mill explosion in Burns Lake. And we reached out very quickly to provide assistance, to offer assistance. We sent teams up there. We went into the community and tried to do what we could to help the community rebuild their economy and put a plan together. We've done it in Grand Forks. We've done it in Alberta after the flooding. We went into Alberta and helped them set up, and Alberta's got their own program now. We've gone into the Virgin Islands and done work down there, over into near the Philippines and a small island over there, and Cambodia, and after disasters, and just trying to help these communities in a number of areas in the state, trying to help these communities recover from a devastating disaster. And we were involved in 2017. With the wildfires, and you see the picture on the right hand side on the bottom, with in Ashcroft, and communities need to be better prepared on how do we deal with the devastating economic impacts of any disaster, whether it's a fire, whether it's the loss of an employer that's going to impact the workers in your community or the residents of your community, whether it's flooding. No community should have to, feel these impacts, but it happens. And then when we look at what's happening in COVID today, with the impacts of COVID in all of our communities, it is impacting, when we talked about earlier about your businesses and your home-based businesses, and maybe you don't have like a physical building, but they have a house and they're working out of their homes, and how badly is that impacting them? And are they taking advantage of all of the supports that are out there and working with them? And those types of things should be part of a plan to better prepare your community to recover following a disaster. You want to add?
No, I totally agree with that. And I think we are fortunate enough to be invited back in a couple of weeks to actually give a presentation on disaster recovery.
Correct. Yeah. So thanks very much, everybody. And I apologize, we've kind of run right to the end. This is our contact information on this last slide. I don't know if you want to open it up for a few questions, we can stick around for a bit, but this is our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us. I believe the presentation will be shared, Svetlana, so we can send you a PDF of the presentation to share with everybody.
Yeah, I'll send it to all of the participants.
Thank you, Colleen and Dale. Appreciate all your wisdom and advice
We
and
can't hear
information.
you, or at least I can.
You can't? Okay.
No, I can. Yeah.
So as Dale mentioned, we are having Colleen and Dale back on August 5th as we continue with our BC Links to Learning series of webinars. So on August 5th, please, we'll send out registration information for that, but that is on disaster preparation and how to position your community in the eventuality of either a natural disaster or, who knows, a pandemic. So thank you so much. If anyone has any questions, you can use the chat function or raise your hand.
Well, if you're talking to me, I'm sorry, I cannot hear anything. Business plan link. We spoke of is found.
Everybody else can hear, Paul?
Futurepreneur.
Yes, we can share that. We can share it out, and go, and then it can be circulated to you as well. Yeah. I don't know why we can't hear. Maybe I'll switch speakers quickly here and see if that helps.
Everyone can hear me except
except Dale, yes.
Except Dale and my mother.
But also, if anybody has any questions, you can also send them.
Can you hear me?
And I will forward them to Dale and Colleen.
You can? Speak.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can hear you just fine.
I can hear you now. I can hear you.
Yay!
Hey.
And now it's time to say goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah. Okay.
All right, so please take time. We'll send out another e-blast, but take time to register for the BC Links to Learning with Colleen and Dale for August 5th on disaster preparation. We'll be following up. Everyone that attended this session will get a follow-up email with the presentation and any of the documents and videos that were shared today. Thank you all. Take care. Have
Thank you. And Dale, if you want to
afternoon.
stick around, there were a couple of questions that was sent to you through chat.
Sure.
So if you would like to take a look and maybe answer, that would be great. And
Sure.
thank you again. And yes, for everybody else, have a great day, guys. And we'll, but until the next webinar.
Yes.
Yes, we look forward to
We
it.
look forward to it. Yeah. Thanks for the comments. We were happy to share the information, and I think, and definitely we're going to load anything. I'm not sure if we've missed any questions. Svetlana, please let me know, because
Yeah, there is one question, Dale, from Rose. She's asking if you can share where that business plan link you spoke of can be found. If you
Yeah,
could
I
send
put it into I put the link into the chat.
Perfect. Excellent. I think that was the only one. Well, thank you so much.
Okay. Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Take care. Have a good afternoon.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.